Let's try that again. Hello and good morning. It is Wednesday, October 9th. I'm Rob, that developer dad, and we're still working on that application. And this week is all about code cleanup, getting our compiler warnings resolved, and so on and so forth. I did some digging last night, just to confirm the benefits to taking care of the compiler warnings that may appear as we work, and so on and so forth, and eliminating those. And beyond just a professionalism benefit, it certainly is very nice to open up a solution for the first time and not have a bunch of yellow triangles with the exclamation points and them staring you in the face. Beyond that, it increases the efficiency of our builds and can help us avoid some pretty nasty runtime errors occasionally. Those warnings are sort of the dotNet compiler telling us, hey, you're doing a thing here that, if certain conditions exist at runtime, this could crash your application. So I want to take care of those before I start moving forward with more features, more capabilities, more expansions to the system. Offline, I am also planning the integration with the payment processor that I'm going to be signing up with, and sort of designing sort of that admin, the administrative portion of it. Right now, that work exists purely as like napkin sketches in a diagramming application, just trying to get flowcharts of what the process is going to look like from a high level. Kind of wrap my brain around all of the things that need to happen, and I'm already seeing some user experience issues with the way I'm thinking I might need to do it. But we'll see how that shakes out as I continue designing and learning about the different systems that I need to integrate. So let's dive into the code with no further ceremony. So yesterday I did a big honking commit, and I pushed a branch that's very full of changes up to my code repo, and I merged those in and redeployed those over to the sort of preliminary hosting stuff in Azure. And I cut a new branch for quality, resolve compiler warnings at that time. It currently has no changes in it. So let's see what the next file in the list is. And I actually want to sort these by file. And we've got 3 in view NPC details. We've got more than that in view NPC attributes. We've got 1 in the service proxy. We've got a few in the NPC list, and then some in the test projects. I'm putting the ones in the test projects at a much lower priority right now. So let's start off with the view NPC details. And a lot of these are, non-nullable property, must contain a non-null value when exiting the constructor, dereference of possibly null references, stuff like that. And these can be real painful to debug when that edge case hits once in a blue moon and somebody gets an error message. And honestly, error messages or crashing apps are absolutely part of our user experience, because you can have a very pretty user interface, but if it crashes or throws errors or does something unexpected every time you click a button, or even occasionally when you go to use it, if it misbehaves, that degrades your user experience. So let's get these cleaned up. So here's the constructor for the view NPC details component, and it's complaining that the visibility property must contain a non-null value when exiting the constructor. So let's see. Here's visibility right here, and it says we've got two references to it. And it's being set out in the razor, and it's being set in view NPC details razor. So, or it's not being set in the razor, but it's being set by the parent component. So, show for page state. Let's take a look at what show for page state looks like. We'll just go here. We'll pop in here, go to the definition. Okay. So here we're calling an extension method on a Boolean that we created, and it's as string, where we say shown for true, hidden for false. So we're just going to do something very similar to that over in view NPC details, right in the constructor. And I want the default value of this to be as if it's hidden of, where is it? Visibility. Excuse me. Visibility equals false dot as string. And I want to take another look over here. And I want to grab these. And that's really not wonderful. Don't much care for those magic strings. I mean, they work, but what if I change my CSS class name or whatever? Then I have to go through and find all of these instances, and we're using them in multiple places in the code. So let's see here. Let's go to the definition of as string. Public static string as string. Boolean extensions. Do we have them as consts? Yeah, I think so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this. Quick actions and refactorings. Introduce constant for all occurrences of false. Public const string. False. Yeah. Do the same thing here. And I'm just going to call this one true. this value, true value, false value. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is, instead of having them, we can get rid of that. Let's come in here. I'm also going to need that page model. Where are you? You're in here. Well, let's resolve this first. Public const string show item equals, and get rid of those escapes because I forgot that I had pulled the things in. I'll make these public. Come back over here. Public const string hide item is that. Now I think this version of it as string, that's super flexible, but I'm using it to define visibility enough that it might make sense. Public static string as visibility this bool value string ret equals hide item return ret if value is true. And yes, I could have done just this, and that's fine, but I like my code to be a little bit more language-like and explicit, just purely for readability purposes. There we go. So here's show item. And now we've got a new extension method called as visibility. And let's change this to as visibility. And there we go. Now let's find the other references to this. We've got one in here, and that's just a reference to this. Let's come in here. We'll go to show for page state. Go to definition. And instead of as string, where we're passing those magic things, as visibility. Save. Now, I do want to do a find in files for dot as string, and that's the key there that I want to use. And we'll just find all. And we'll come back into create NPC page model, hide when page state. I don't think that's even actually being used, but We'll refactor that. If this isn't being used, we should comment it out. But what I'll do is this method is marked for deletion. And let's rebuild our solution. See if we get any new warnings. Get rid of that. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't see any new warnings in here. All right, so let's continue working on view NPC details. Let's go here. Deref of a possibly null reference. Okay, loading overlay. Let's see what the suggested fix is. Into extracted method to invoke at call sites. No. Should I be doing my No, it doesn't seem to fix anything. We'll leave it public. If loading overlay is not null, so there's that. I don't like that, but whatever. Because that null forgiving operator should all right. Save NPC clicked is not null. Get rid of that. I guess Roslyn hasn't caught up to. Oh, it might be the await. If loading overlay is not equal to null. And we'll go home, get rid of this null forgiving. All right. Save, save all, build, rebuild. So I wonder, so with the await, it didn't like the null forgiving operator. But if I just invoke it like this, so it's going to complain about possible thing. Okay, so we're seeing a difference here. When we are awaiting an async operation, we have to make absolutely sure that the object that we're about to invoke that async operation on exists. Otherwise, the compiler gets a little oogie. But when we're just invoking it traditionally, then we don't have to worry about it quite so, or we can actually use the null coalescing operator. And these need to happen sequentially, so I can't just wrap them in a collection of tasks and wait them all. Okay, this'll do. This'll be fine. Save. Let's run the app just to make absolutely certain. And this gets triggered on save NPC clicked. Sign in. Go to the NPCs and we'll wait for the database to wake up. And here's Blinky Cat. Just waiting for the database to wake up. So my wife is telling me my blue color scheme reminds her too much of Windows. I'm like, yeah, but Battleship Gray makes me depressed. Just while that goes and shakes its head and runs around, let's see how many errors. Oh, well, it's not reporting any errors to me right now. No errors, no warnings. Here we go. So we'll go to new NPC. And retired scholar who used to be a criminal. Here we go. Edric Thorne. Blah, blah, blah. And we'll save. Go back to the list. And there's Edric. Okay. All right, so everything's still working. Good. Save. build. We'll bring our error messages back and our warnings and all that good stuff. Here's the tests. And we are back to our warnings. Good. Let's move on to the next component file. And this is view NPC attributes. By default, we want this to be false or hidden. Visibility equals as visibility. Save. Toggle text must contain a non-null value when exiting the constructor. So I know that we're using as string on this. And let's see. Show options panel. Those are my external event handlers. Location, yeah. Height, profession, toggle options panel, toggle text. Here we go. And so here's where we can actually use that as string. And this wants to be set when we exit the constructor. So what I'm going to do is we're not going to use dot as visibility here. We're going to go ahead and use that injected thing. Show hide is the false value. Whoops. Because that sets text on the UI. There's no need to turn that into a constant or anything like that. At least not a public constant on the extension class. But I do want to extract. I want to introduce a constant for all occurrences of the string show. And we're going to call it options button text show. And then I'm going to use Control minus to bounce back to where I was. And just because I'm a little bit funny about the verticality of my code, we are going to introduce a constant for all occurrences of hide, and we're going to call it options button text hide. Bam. Go back to where we were, and that I can live with. And let's come back to where we were when we were setting this stuff. Selectable options, user options, visibility, and toggle text equals false dot as string option button text show. And I'm just going to boop this over so that it's aligned with its friend. There we go. Save that. 3 more view NPC attributes, Razor CS, and they're all grouped up, and I bet I know what they're doing. And it's that same thing that we ran into before. And so we're going to use the exact same strategy to repair it here. So because we know we can't use this null coalescing operator when we're awaiting an async invocation, we need to add an actual formal null check here. Easy enough. Overlay. Not leading overlay, but loading overlay. Got to spell it right. Is not equal to null. If generate AI clicked is not equal to null. And we're going to bump that in. Now, the coding standard that I usually try to adhere to says never to do this. Like, wrap the conditional code in braces, even if it's only a single line. Normally, I'd agree with that. But in this case, I think for these, doing so would actually degrade the readability here. I think if it's one line, like if this, then that, done, like if condition is true, then do this one thing. I think for stuff like that, it's perfectly reasonable and readable as long as you put it on the next line and indent it, is how I feel about that. I could very easily wrap it in braces like that. But I don't, I really feel like that kind of degrades our readability. On the other hand, let's talk about cognitive load. Every time you make an exception to a standard or an exception to the way things have been agreed upon, like anytime you make an exception to the quote unquote standard operating procedures, code standards, etc., 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 you're increasing the cognitive load on the people that are adhering to it. If you are going to, say in your coding standard, use braces appropriately, etc., etc., then you should do that all the time. Period. Why? Because it decreases the overall cognitive load. It decreases the number of things the other people on your team or future you has to remember and keep in mind while they are solving the issues, building the solutions, etc., etc. We want the act of typing in the code we want our people to be thoughtful in how they write the code, but we want them to be thoughtful about the code that solves the problem. We don't want them thinking about the syntax, grammar, and structure of how that code gets typed, if that makes sense. So the key here is consistency and simplicity. And when you've got a standard and you're sticking to it consistently, that removes the non-domain thinking from having to be front of mind for the people that are actually writing the code. I want the people on my team and the people that I work with to be focused on solving the business problems, solving the puzzle in front of them, rather than scratching their head remembering, okay, so how does that jerk Rob want us to format the code in this scenario? I want that to be natural. I don't want them to have to think about it. That way they're not going to be falling in and out of flow. They're not going to be doing any kind of cognitive task switching while they go. They're going to be able to focus on the actual important work. And if I'm sacrificing my subjective view of readability for lower cognitive load, that's a sacrifice I'm more than happy to make. So I need to find the component that I was just in, and it's in View NPC Details, not the actual Razor file, but the C# file itself. So we'll come in here, and I believe it was way down here where I've set these up. I'm going to go ahead and put those braces in. And here, because I've split my function calls out onto multiple lines, it actually feels a little better here. So there's a number of things to unpack from this past 5 or so minutes. You are going to second guess yourself. You're going to do it dozens of times a day. And that's okay. As long as you actually, when you're second guessing yourself, you actually do the thought work to make sure that you're second guessing yourself into a better path. And when you're a junior, or when you're first learning development overall, or you're new to an organization, or you're moving from an old team at your current organization to a new team, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that you're going to need to learn about how that team or that organization approaches their stuff. I call that the junior handoff point. We're all juniors at some point. I've been doing this for decades, and whenever I start something new, I go into junior mode. And whenever somebody joins a team that I'm part of or participating in or even leading, when somebody comes in, they're going to get the junior handoff point right up front. Because while they may have been slinging C# or dotNet or SQL or whatever for decades, they haven't been doing so within the nuanced context of the team that they have just joined. And it's really just, I don't want to use terms like level setting or anything like that. It's just, here's how our team approaches things, so on and so forth. It's always up for discussion. It's always up to be amended. But this is the lay of the land now. This is how we approach things, and we like to keep it consistent so that we're thinking about the actual software we're writing instead of the code syntax structure and and grammar, for lack of a better word. So here's on save NPC clicked. That's nice and consistent. I'm not going to have to think about this when I come back to look at it in 6 months. That's a win. And we've got one more compiler warning here. And let's handle it exactly the same way. If loading overlay is not equal to null, and I'm going to need to put us on into a be right back state here in a second, because I've been up since about 8 and I've had about 4 cups of coffee. Guess what? I'll be right back, and then we're going to finish this one up and see what else we can knock out in the hour we have this morning. Back shortly. And I'm muting my mic. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Looks like my camera is cutting the top of my head off when I lean forward a little bit, so let's fix that. That's better. All right. I'll do the same thing here. Save NPC click. So, if, and we'll pop this in here. And that should absolutely be awaited. We'll get rid of the null coalescing. And finally, if loading overlay is not null, there we go. Note that the null forgiving operator is not being used here. Use of the null forgiving operator doesn't work well with awaited async methods. We need to do the null check as a discrete evaluation. I'm just going to drop that comment in here. Control C. I'm not going to drop that thing everywhere. And I think that's it for viewNPCDetails.razor.C#. Cool. We're down to 10 warnings, and like 5 of them are in the test projects. Not bad. So API payload, if API result was successful. Oh, we're back into this stuff. PC client model from the API payload. This is a little bit more complex. And this is on Save NPC. If API payload is null, no, we're going to bump this above the assignment to API payload. Copy this, paste this here. We're going to disallow this from being null. We know this isn't null. It's still complaining. Let's handle it. GUID error ID equals GUID.new GUID string message, used to be a lowercase m, equals save operation did not return the latest version of this NPC. Null NPC message. There. What are you complaining about? Okay, yeah. Value never used. Excuse me. And this is proxy result. Yep. Proxy result dot add error. Return proxy result. Save. And now I should be able to get rid of the null forgiving. And that looks okay. So we're doing an early return here if anything along this chain is null. Good. Now, another thing, as much as I like this op result of t and task of op result of T, and so on and so forth, as a pattern for removing the need to just throw exceptions up and down my stack. It's not exactly friendly to that cognitive load thing that I was just ranting about. So we might take that on, the complexity of unwrapping the results from the next component hop and wrapping them up in the results that need to be sent back down to the stack to whoever called this code. Stuff like that is effective, but it's messy, and I don't know that I like it a whole awful lot, because we're spending an awful lot of code manipulating these result types and not actually focusing on what this method should be doing, which is sending the NPC client model and the townsperson that lives inside of it off to the services to be saved. Most of this code is just messy response processing, and I'd like to move that response processing somewhere else, I think. Perhaps. If we can come up with a clean way to do it generically without having to create a ton of other code, I think I want to do it. Not today. But we might do a spike tomorrow. We'll see. So proxy result. Bottom line is it's working. It runs. It's just brain cell expense. It's expensive for my brain cells. So we can save all this, close it. We have no more issues in the NPC service proxy, or at least no more compiler warnings in the NPC service proxy. So let's take a look here. View NPC handler. Now, I think on some of my other components, let's take a look at view NPC attributes. No, I want the C#, not the Razor file. So generate AI clicked, save NPC clicked. Those are those. Those are those handlers. Generate NPC clicked is an action. This naming is not wonderful, I have to say. So those are all nullable. Let's take a look here. And it's complaining about view NPC handler. Let's see if we can find it. Here's view NPC handler. That actually does need to be nullable. So we'll save that. Visibility must contain a non-null value. So we'll just do visibility equals false dot as visibility. Boop. Save. App context must contain, I believe, app state provider is nullable everywhere else that I'm using it. So we're in NPC list. Let's take a look at NPC attributes. C# again. And I want to make sure we'll use this. App context, do I have? I don't. I believe I do have the app context in page models. Let's take a look. App context. Here's app context. Yes, I have made it nullable over here. We'll make it nullable over here too. There we go. Good, good. Dereference of a possibly null reference. App context.get current user. We'll do that. And that solves that. Because if user is null, we're going to bounce. And there was a different pattern I used for this somewhere else. And let's see. Did I do that here? I did. And I actually want to replicate this inside the NPC list. So we're going to come down here, go to definition. And guard NPC services exist. You know what? I'm just going to grab all of these. All of this stuff. Copy. Oh, I'm cringing. I'm internally cringing here. Ugh. I just felt my soul cry a little bit here. Change it to guard NPC services exists. Guard user exists. Go. Move this down here. Use a forgiving operator. And we'll use the null forgiving operator over here. I don't recommend using that a whole lot. Unless you are absolutely sure that this will not return a null value. Now, what are you complaining about? Oh, you're down here complaining about how there's no logger. It's okay, we'll add it up here. Public logger of NPC list. We'll make this nullable. Logger get set. We'll tell the dependency injection mechanism that we need it. And we're going to come down to the bottom of the page. There's logger. Only if logger is not null, then we're going to log an error. Cool. Tests. Now, the ones in dice bag tests, it's complaining about number of runs. And the reason this is complaining is just really just remove unused parameter number of runs if it's not part of a shipped public API. But it's using this class data. So if I remove it, I think it breaks the test. Run test. Oh yeah, and that fails. Unexpected error detected. Failed. Show in the test explorer and see what's what. $80 of these failed. Every single one of them. Invalid operation exception. Expected 2 parameter values, but 3 parameter values were provided. So yeah. I'm going to put this back. We'll rerun all the damn tests. Off it goes. Everything passed again. So, for this warning, we are going to because it's the exact same issue on the 2 tests that we're getting the warning on. I'm just going to go ahead and suppress with a pragma warning those 2 complaints. Build, rebuild. I don't like using pragma warnings. I really, really don't. But occasionally, it's fine. We've eliminated all but 4 of our compiler warnings. Remove unused parameter. I'm going to go ahead and drop a comment. These pragma warnings were added after much thought. To stand up a whole new data class, whole new class data type to be able to remove and unused parameter seemed silly and needless. Save. Whenever you use a pragma warnings are basically just ways to say, yeah, don't treat that as an error, or don't warn me about that, or what have you, whenever you use one. Well, first off, a good rule of thumb is don't, but sometimes you gotta. You don't have another choice. Leave a comment explaining why you're leaving the condition in place that was setting off that compiler error or that compiler warning, and the justification for using it. Because later, after you've moved on to another organization and some new guy has come in and they're looking through, they're going to rip all of those out knowing pragma warning bad without knowing why they're in there. So let's leave a comment saying, basically, I didn't want to add this, but here's the trade-off that I made, and this is why I'm using them. So, just a little rule of thumb. And you know what? We've got 4 left. Let's leave those for this afternoon. I'll come back at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll tackle these last four compiler warnings. They're just in unit test projects. We may be able to do something about some of them. We may not. We'll see when we get there. So until then, take care of yourselves. Maybe eat some lunch. That was to me. I need to eat some lunch. And happy coding. I'll see you again this afternoon.